and welcome to Pastor's Perspective, sponsored by Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa. My name is Brian Perez, and let's open up those million phone lines that we have to talk to you guys at 888-564-6173. Actually, it's much less than a million, but that's why sometimes people can't get through because they all call in at once, and we've only got a limited amount of phone lines. But give us a call, 888-564-6173. Today and tomorrow are your last two chances this week to ask us your questions about the Bible, the Christian faith, just about anything that's on your mind. So call us today. 888-564-6173 is the phone number. And answering your questions today, we've got Brian Broderson, the senior pastor of Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa in Southern California. On Skype, we have Tony Clark, the pastor of Calvary Chapel, Newport News in Virginia. And on the Bobby Cam, it's Bobby Conway from Image Church in Charlotte, North Carolina. And the YouTube channel called Christianity Still Makes Sense. Hello, guys. What's going on?
Howdy, everyone.
Hey. Good to be with you guys.
Yeah, good to see you. How's everybody doing?
All is well.
Very well.
All is well. Are we thankful and ready to celebrate that thankfulness on Thursday?
Oh, sure we are.
Yeah.
Yep.
Of course.
What were you showing us, Bobby?
Very thankful.
No, he's sending me a secret message. Yes.
I thought he was showing us a picture of like the turkey they're baking or something.
No. Yes.
Here's a picture for you to look at. I just drew this of Winston.
Did you really?
Wow.
Good job.
Very good.
Wow.
Bro, you draw
you.
like that?
He's got skills.
Draw like that?
Yeah,
Wow.
I've been having a. Here's my other character I've been working on. This is a surrealism deal. I'm going to turn that into a train, and he's going to be riding on the front of the train on a clock.
Wow.
And then
Bro.
I
didn't know you did it like that, bro.
did a little Heather.
Boy,
Wow,
this
bro.
is a complete surprise to Tony and I
Yes.
both.
Yep.
We did not know that.
Wow.
We're gonna
Well,
have to. We're gonna have to sign up for a portrait. You know.
Or something.
Yeah.
Hey, that would be fun, man. Yeah.
I want to see a Bobby Conway version of Tony Clark.
Hey.
Oh.
The beard.
No, I'm
We could
not
do it.
worthy.
I could just draw you guys while I'm on the show. Sometimes I just doodle and it's just kind of fun. Two things at once.
Wow.
How
Yeah, I just started doing that as a hobby about a month ago.
No kidding.
And I've been studying a lot of art because I felt for a long time that I've always loved aesthetics and stuff. But I've always felt like, you know how sometimes you might feel like you might have a knack for something if you just
did it.
spend time doing
Yeah.
it. So I just have been reading a lot about the kind of some of more of the technicalities. So I build the right foundation.
Yeah. Wow.
And then I've just been trying that. And so I spend time each day kind of as a hobby, just to have another outlet for me. And I've got, and what I really want to do is teach myself to be able to draw through devotions, kind of like just how my soul's doing on paper, using the art of surrealism.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited about some of those concepts.
Yeah. I'm so impressed. Back like 50 years ago, I thought, I think I have a knack for music and playing guitar and stuff. And 50 years later, I figured out I actually didn't have a knack for it. And so I was just in a friend's office playing on his acoustic Gibson and thinking, gosh, I'm playing the same 4 chords I was playing 50 years ago. So
That's because you haven't played in 50 years.
well, it's true. Not quite 50, but it's been a few. Well, I am impressed, Bobby.
Yeah.
I am.
Well, thanks.
Wow.
One thing I know about myself is I do not have a knack for drawing, and everybody who's ever seen me play Pictionary knows that.
Right. I'm the same way. I can do stick figures, but that's about it. I can't get into detail like Bobby did, or like Greg Laurie. He's another doodler
that's great.
Cartoonist.
My wife and both of my daughters are actually quite impressive artists. Just, they can sit down and sketch something and you're like, oh wow, that's amazing. And it's sort of like me and my sons, we didn't get that one so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what happened? It was during, I remember COVID, and like when I was living out there, Brian, and I was going out surfing a lot, and that was a lot of fun, just trying to find an outlet.
Yeah.
But then the beach got so busy, COVID happened, and then I moved, and I was like, well, that's going to be hard to do that from where I'm at. So I needed something. So I love the arts.
Well, good for you.
What do you guys do for your hobbies? You guys got like little things that are meaningful to you to do?
I walk my dog. That's kind of my hobby these days with my wife.
I drink coffee. That's it.
Yeah, I do that too.
Yeah.
No hobbies.
Yeah, I used to run all the time, but now I can't do that. So I try to do some kind of moving. I'm reduced to walking on a treadmill, and that's about all I got left in the tank.
And
not much of a hobby.
At one stage in Tony's life, he was pretty impressive on the court. He could go to the hoop. He could do all kinds of fun, fancy maneuvers. Those were the good old days.
Those were the good old days. Yeah. I can't even do a layup now, but those were the good old days. Can't get 2 inches off, inch off the ground. That was, yeah, I remember those days. There's a girl here at our church. She just made the all Air Force basketball team, and I told her, how I used to be able to play, and I know how. I said I was pretty good and that sort of thing. Then I started getting bummed out because I am not even a shell of what I used to be as far as those days are concerned. But those basketball days were some good days.
Yeah, those were fun times. And then I could talk about my
boxing,
surfing past. Well, my boxing.
And your boxing too.
Yeah, well, that's not much to talk about there, but...
All right, 888-564-6173 is our number, 888-564-6173. You can also send in your questions using Facebook Messenger or on Instagram, or by filling out the form on the Pastor's Perspective page of our flagship radio station's website, kwave.com, and you can do that. But the best way to get an answer is to call us when we're here, like today, till 4 p.m. Pacific time at 888-564-6173. Here's a question that Lisa sent in. I'm a Christian therapist who supervises new therapists in their program or accruing hours for licensure. We have been discussing lots on spiritual warfare and mental health and how the enemy has been attacking recently, praying with each other and processing this together and for our clients. One of my therapists was asking if Dr. Michael Heiser was a good recommendation to explore, but I don't know much of his work. Do you know if he is, and what other recommendations would you have regarding spiritual warfare, maybe even specific to mental health, besides Brian Broderson's amazing book? Yes, Lisa said that in here. Thank you, pastors. I listen to you daily, and God has used your ministry to grow my walk, even in the ways I get to be used by God to pour into new Christian therapists. You truly have kingdom impact. Thank you again, Lisa. And that book that Lisa's referencing is The Powers of Darkness and the People of God, which is sitting right over there on the shelf. I forgot to bring it in closer to me like I normally do so I can hold it up to the camera. So I'll get that as Pastor Brian answers this question.
Yeah, Bobby, maybe you can help out with this too. So Michael Heiser, the only Michael Heiser book I read was the book called The Spiritual Realm, I think it was called, or
Unseen Realm.
Unseen Realm, yeah. Unseen Realm, yeah. So I read that. I think he does have a few other books. I read numerous articles by him. And although I appreciated some of his insights, I didn't always totally agree with his perspective on things. He was, the interesting thing about Michael Heiser is he came from an academic background. He was a biblical scholar for a long, long time and took more of a naturalistic look at some of the biblical descriptions of supernatural things, especially when it comes to the world of the devil and the demonic and so forth. That was kind of just the way he approached Scripture. Oftentimes, this is, what happens with people in academia. But anyway, at a certain point, he had just like the light switched on, and suddenly he saw things that he had not seen before. And so he became an avid believer in the unseen realm. And then I think he spent really kind of the rest of his life academically and even practically exploring that, writing on that topic and so forth. And he passed away last year, I think about a year ago. So Bobby, have you read more of his stuff than, and I don't know if he ever went into the realm of counseling and where spiritual warfare plays a role in that. I'm not familiar with that.
So here's some thoughts, and I'd be curious what you think. So yeah, I've read different books of Michael Heiser, and he definitely a brilliant scholar, and he was taken home at a young age, unfortunately, to cancer. His big thing was the divine counsel from Psalm 82. That would be kind of the controversial piece.
Yeah.
I think stepping back from that, Lisa, my recommendation would be this. I would say we don't want to give more attention to Satan than necessary, but we don't want to be inattentive to what he's doing. And what I would say then is the Bible doesn't give us a ton about this. And perhaps there's a good reason for that. What we learn is that, God is the ultimate. There's not some eternal cosmic devil that reigns equal with God, like, the yin and the yang. But we know that he's a created being. We know that he's powerful. We know that he, along with a third of the angels, rebelled against God because of pride in their heart. There was a fall, and then we know that the evil one has sought in Genesis 3 to run humanity down with temptation and thwarting God's word. And when you run the storyline, you can see when you come to a book in Daniel that there's cosmic battle that's taken place between the good angels and the fallen angels. When you look at Job, we learn that you have to have permission from God in order to harass one of his own. When you come to the New Testament, you really get a sense that Jesus has full authority over him. When you come to the apostles, we're told, hey, Lord rebuke you, like you see in the book of Jude. So we're not to get so obsessed with this. We're to submit to God, resist the devil, he will flee from us. James chapter 4, verse 7. We learn in 1 Peter 5, 7 that the devil roars around like a prowling lion, seeking whom he may devour. So what do we do with all this? We learn in Ephesians 6 about the spiritual armor. I think that we can learn enough, but we don't need to spend our every day obsessing on it. And I would say what is helpful about Pastor Brian's book is he just deals with what I just did. Like he's not trying to write a 500-page tome and overwhelming us, because my fear is you got a lot of authors writing on stuff and they're blaming stuff on the devil, or they're erasing the devil away, or they're coming up with all kinds of theories and practices that really just burden us beyond what's necessary. So I think if we can just be aware of his tactics, his strategies, understand the role of prayer, the armor of God, and knowing that as God's children, that he cannot possess us, but he can toy with us.
Tony, did you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think what the great doctor said is definitely 100% true. And I think we need to have a balance on it. But I think that the Bible talks about the unseen realm enough for us to get a glimpse on what's going on. For example, the unseen world is just as busy and active as the physical world that we see. And I think 2 Corinthians 2:11 says, lest Satan should take advantage of us, for we're not ignorant of his devices. And I think we can become ignorant of his devices, of his schemes, and he can take advantage of us. And so we don't want to see a demon under every rock. And nor do we want to, like Hinckley did in the 1800s, paint Satan in some red long johns and a goatee with a pitchfork sitting on the throne in hell. So we don't want to do that either. But I think that there's enough just from Genesis 3 on to let us know that we need to be mindful of what's going on in the spiritual realm. And just like the great doctor talked about in Daniel chapter 10, we get a glimpse of it. Even in the Old Testament, when all of a sudden there's a glimpse of heaven and saying, hey, who's going to convince Jehoshaphat and those guys to go up into battle. And then a lion spirit came up and say, I shall convince them, and say, how? I will be a lion spirit in the mouth of the prophets. And so we get this glimpse into heaven. And we know from Ezekiel 28 and Isaiah 14, Satan, what he was before all this fell and all this kind of stuff happening. So I think more Christians need to be aware of what's going on in the spiritual realm, but at the same time, don't take it so far that you see a demon under every rock.
Yeah, I would say another, I think, helpful book on it, and I think there's more. Clint Arnold, who Clint was the dean at Talbot Seminary for many years.
Oh, yeah.
He wrote a book on the subject as well. And I think, Clint, spiritual warfare. And Clint's great. He would have a good perspective on it. But what I was going to say is C.S. Lewis's book on the subject, the Screwtape Letters, even though it's fictional, yet he's writing about something that's very real and something that you can see in all different walks of life. So, but I think based on who is asking us this question, I think the context is a little bit more mental illness or dealing with things like that. And I do think, and I pointed this out in the book, I do think that whenever there's mental illness, I think there is some demonic component, because the enemy is, he's going to take advantage of any weakness. So if you have a mental weakness, if you're cognitive, if you're not thinking straight, things like that, he's going to try to capitalize on that. So I think we just need to be conscious of that. And that's why in the book I talk about the need, sometimes you obviously need medical help. You might need psychiatric evaluation. You might need medication, but you will always need prayer, because regardless of what the actual root is, the enemy's always going to be in there to some degree. So, but I've met many, many people that have battled with schizophrenia or with, something like the bipolar disorder, whatever the case, whose problem clearly was rooted in their physiological condition, but there was the meddling of the enemy in with that as well. So when I talk to somebody like that, and usually it's somebody who has had a history of already, having been under a doctor's care already, maybe having been medicated. A lot of times people feel guilty that they're on medication, so they feel like, I'm not a good Christian if I'm not trusting the Lord and taking this medication. So I'm going to go off this medication and I'm going to trust the Lord. And then they go into a psychotic realm, and then they have to be hospitalized and everything. So what I'm saying is that I think we have to recognize that there is real mental illness that is not at its root demonic, even though there's demonic elements to it because of what I'm talking about, the enemy taking advantage. And then, of course, there are people who appear to be mentally ill who truly are demonized, and that's a whole nother thing. And being able to ascertain the difference that's where discernment, that's where the challenge comes in. So,
Tony.
I totally agree with that. That's exactly where I'm leaning as far as the enemy is behind it somewhere. In Mark chapter 5 with the maniac of Gadara, when the demon was cast out, he was sitting, clothed, and in his right mind, saying that when the demons were possessing him, he wasn't in his right mind. And 2 Timothy 1:7, God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and of a sound mind. And then Isaiah 26:3 says he will keep you in perfect peace whose mind is stayed on him. So we see that the enemy can get there and through some sort of weakness began to cause there to be some issues on the mental side. And so this is what we see a lot. So we can't totally say we got to use medicine, and we can't totally say the person is demon possessed. Like Pastor Brian said, we got to have some wisdom and discernment on how to differentiate between the two. And that just takes the Spirit of God right there to be able to differentiate between the two, because there are people who are on medicine who may need to repent, and people who've repented may need to be on some medicine. And we got to be able to discern between the two.
Bobby Conway.
Yeah, I mean, this is, I think, hopefully very helpful for you, Lisa. I would say, going back to even 1 Peter in verse 7, casting all of our anxiety upon him because he cares for us. And I mentioned 7 earlier. It's actually 8. And in the next verse, it talks about being sober, be watchful.
Yes.
Your devil, the adversary, he prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. I find it interesting that in verse 7, we're casting our anxiety on God, but verse 8, be watchful with the spiritual warfare. And you can almost see a spiritual warfare connection to our anxiety at times, things we get anxious about. I think what I would want to say to you as a counselor is really just stick to the Bible as it relates to Satan and demons, and maybe do a study all the passages as it relates to the unseen realm with angels and demons. Don't forget about the angels and guardian angels and all that as well. You might look at First Enoch if you're going to go beyond the Bible, but I wouldn't go much further than that, because I don't think we can, from our contemporary stance, be learning and gleaning new things about Satan. He's been around for a while. Contrary, though, I do think we can learn a lot from mental health as a product of general revelation. And so that's where in mental health, we can have a more enlightened understanding about the human psyche, about the body, about how foods interact with it, how they can toy with our emotions and all this stuff. So I would say just stick to the Bible. And then Screw Tape Letters can be a very good tool to use with your clients because it's very short, about 100 pages. And when I was in seminary, we had the project of reading Screw Tape Letters and then writing out our own letter. The whole idea was to write out, given what you know about your fallen nature and given what you know about Satan, what is it that you think he would do to try to take you out? What are your weak spots? What is your Achilles heel? And that's all part of the verse 8 being watchful stuff. So you can't watch if you're not aware. And so that's what I would share.
Tony, looks like you wanted to add one. No? Brian?
That's good stuff. I hope
it is.
I hope Lisa thinks it's as good as
yes. Lots of great resources offered. The Screw Tape Letters by C.S. Lewis, and what else? Clint Arnold. 3 crucial questions about spiritual warfare, and of course, The Powers of Darkness and the People of God by Brian Broderson, which is also available in Spanish.
Yes,
in Espanol.
One thing though, since we're on the topic, guys, I think that. Where Paul is speaking of Satan in Ephesians chapter 2, and he refers to him as the prince of the power of the air. The spirit who now works in the children of disobedience. And you think of like in the last, decade or so, just how you can see just these these doctrines of demons that Paul also warned about when he wrote to Timothy, you just see them blowing. And Paul refers to every wind of doctrine. And these things are just in the air. And people are like inhaling them and just being consumed by them. And I think even as we look at the anti-Semitism that's just suddenly surfaced, and before that, kind of the transgender thing where all of a sudden you've got a whole generation of teenagers who are just, nobody knows what gender they are anymore and things like that. It's like, this is really
confusion.
And this is the work of the devil. This is the kind of stuff the devil does. And we're seeing it just sort of escalated in our current cultural moment. So it's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sure is.
Great conversation on spiritual warfare. Lisa, thank you for sending in your question. All right, 888-564-6173. 888-564-6173 is our number. And let's talk to Karen in Santa Monica, California. Welcome to Pastor's Perspective.
Hello.
Hi, you're listening on K-Wave FM. Did you know that there's a K-Wave AM as well?
Yes, I do know about it.
Awesome. So how can we help you today?
Yes, my question was, is there scripture to tell us, do we know how many destinations that did the Israelites come to before they reached the Promised Land? I heard there were 5. And hello, Pastor Clark. I'm glad you're back on.
Oh, God bless you.
I listen to you every night.
Oh, God bless you. Thank you. I didn't think anybody was up.
I have insomnia. I'm up, and I missed you in Vista, but I hope you come back to California.
Oh, yes. I let it be known.
He's putting that word out for sure.
So Tony, how many destinations were there?
I was sitting here thinking about that, and I don't know why the number 11 comes up, but I'm not sure. I know it's in the book of Exodus that talks about the journeys, but the number of destinations that they hit actually escapes me.
Do you know, Bobby?
Yeah.
You do?
I would say that.
Glad somebody knows.
The way that I would answer that is I don't really think, even if you were to kind of write down every destination they stopped at, I don't think that would necessarily mean that was every destination that they stopped at. You know what I mean? Like, for example, it's capturing kind of their journey, but I'm sure they stopped along the way at many places. So the question wouldn't seem to be something real pressing, in my opinion, unless you were just wanting to know, like, how many destinations did they stay at for an extended period of time? Because they're always when they're on the move, they're passing through and staying the night in different spots, and it might not catalog how many nights they stayed in certain places. It might just show that they were in place A and now they're in place B. Well, there were a lot of places that they might have stopped at between place A and place B. So the question really wouldn't even be worth, stressing about, because there's no way we could know.
Yeah, but if you wanted to, here's a list right here of different places. The book of Numbers in the Hebrew Bible is called the Book of Wanderings, and because Numbers really does record. It's called Numbers in the Greek version because of the, it has the genealogies there, but it really does record, or it's in the wilderness is actually the Hebrew title, in the wilderness. And when you read through Numbers, which I'm actually doing right now, you will get a good sense of those places. But one thing to say, they didn't travel far. They pretty much traveled in a circle for 40 years. They did not, it wasn't like they were just 40 years on a journey and, wow, we finally ended up in the North Pole. They would have after 40 years, but no, they were just walking in a circle. And Deuteronomy, the Lord says, you've circled this mountain long enough. Now it's time to go into the land.
Tony?
Yeah.
Well, Numbers 33 mentions some 42 stations that they hit along the way. Like the great doctor said, it could have been an overnight stay or it could have been whatever. But Numbers 33 mentions some 42.
Could have been all those stopovers, too. We'll be back in a little bit here on Pastor's Perspective. Stand by. This is Pastor's Perspective. Thank you so much for listening today on the radio, or maybe you're listening on a podcast after the program was done recording, or maybe you're watching us on Facebook or YouTube. Hello to all of you. We are here until 4 p.m. Pacific time today, answering your questions at 888-564-6173. Brian Broderson from Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa is answering the questions. So is Bobby Conway from Image Church in Charlotte, North Carolina via the Bobby Cam, and Tony Clark from Calvary Chapel, Newport News in Virginia via Skype. The number again, 888-564-6173. And speaking of Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa, ladies, there is an event going on next weekend, Saturday, December 2nd. It is a Christmas coffee. You can find out all about it at cccm.com, or we can ask Pastor Brian to give you all the details about that.
All the details. Yes, my favorite
Cheryl's listening right now.
Of the year. Well, today, because Cheryl's been announcing Amy Orr Ewing, who is our guest speaker, who is just fabulous. Bobby can put in a word for Amy, too, because he really loves Amy's ministry. Mm-hmm. But Molly Toms is also, she's going to be sharing in music, and Molly happens to be here today. I ran into her, of all places, at a Mexican restaurant for lunch, and I looked over and thought, wow, that girl looks like Molly, and lo and behold, it was Molly. She flew in last night from England, so yes. So it's going to be a fantastic time, ladies. I can assure you, I have not attended one of these, but I have witnessed them from afar, and I have seen many wonderful things at the, what's it called, the boutique. They do a great, great boutique, and there's going to be, fun food, and it's going to be great. December the 2nd, which is a Saturday, I think. Is it a Saturday?
Yes.
Yep. Saturday, December the 2nd.
Yep. Fun food as opposed to funny tasting food. Like, this food
fun.
tastes funny.
It's
not
fun.
what we're saying.
Like when
fun
you're
food.
eating it, you're having fun.
Yes.
Yes. That's what I mean by fun food.
Yes. More information at christmascoffee.cccm.com.
Let's face it, it's not all food is not fun, right?
No.
I mean, some food is.
We were talking yesterday about some
I
of
gotta
the
eat
food.
this? Oh,
Yeah.
my gosh, you're
Yeah.
kidding.
What does Cheryl say? Asparagus and... No, not asparagus.
No, she loves asparagus.
Arugula.
Arugula.
Kale and arugula. She cannot eat anymore. And,
She likes arugula, though, but I don't know, she's a big kale fan, but I know Bobby's a big kale fan. I mean, you can just tell by looking at him. He loves kale.
I like chia seeds. That's kind of like my go-to snack.
Wow.
Yeah.
888-564-6173 is our number. Give us a call.
What is Bobby? Is Bobby drawing a picture of us right now? That's what I want. He's over there.
Is he?
He's
Let's
kind
see
of
it.
looking at
Let's see it,
something else.
Bobby.
Oh, look at that. Hey,
Man.
wait. That's Brian Perez.
I'm doing, yeah, no. You see, getting all my measurements ready, and that's what I'm going to do.
I'm sorry, Heather.
I'll show you when I'm done. We'll see how it comes out.
Okay, good.
Amen.
All right. 888-564-6173. I think you need to apologize to Heather for
Heather, I'm
Mark.
sorry.
Yes. All right. Let's go to New Jersey. Sam is watching us on YouTube. Let's wave to Sam. Thank you so much for watching us, Sam. How can we help you?
Hey, guys. Hey, I'm an artist, too. So,
Cool.
an artist a long time. So, anyway.
Wonderful.
Okay. So, there's people that smoke pot in my apartment, complex and stuff. And I get really I get nervous and I get scared because if I smell it, I feel like, what if the demons, enter me? If I'm smelling, the pot and stuff, and if I get high, and I don't know, and I tried incense, and incense doesn't really work. It works, but not really. But then I found out that it causes cancer if you use a lot of them. And sometimes I open the window because but then it's cold in the wintertime, especially in Jersey. So I guess I wanted your perspective and your prayers.
Okay, so we've often heard about the dangers of secondhand smoke, physically speaking, but Sam is wondering about secondhand marijuana smoke, and not from a physical point of view, but more of a spiritual point of view. Tony Clark, what would you say to Sam?
Yeah, we know the dangers of secondhand smoke, whether it's smoke from a cigarette or marijuana, but whether a demon comes through the vents and enter into you as you smell it. Now, I think that's a little too far, far-fetched as far as thinking that way. We know that drugs are a gateway for demonic activity. We know that, but whether it's coming through and the demon comes with it, no, I don't think that. Greater is He that is in you than he that is in the world. And I just think that God would definitely, He's more than able to protect you from that sort of thing. And demons just can't come into an individual unless they are invited, especially someone who is a believer. You cannot be demon possessed and the demon can oppress you and give you a hard time, harass you, but he cannot possess you and slide into you through the nostrils of marijuana. No, I think that's just a little too far-fetched.
All right, Sam, thank you for calling us today here on Pastor's Perspective, 888-564-6173. Pastor Brian?
I agree with Tony, and I'm so glad that's the case because I'll tell you, man, sometimes just
Living in
walking
California.
around and there's all kinds of stuff in the air.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're sitting at a red light with the window down, and the car next to you it's like, welcome to California, folks.
Yeah.
Some of the great
I know, right? Yeah.
strides forward we have made in the last few decades. It's just amazing.
Yeah, really.
How wonderful.
Well, did you hear about Oregon? Because Oregon has legalized so much different stuff, and now they're starting to say, hold on, I think we made a mistake here. The voters are saying that. So.
Yeah, well, you do figure this out at some point if you still have a brain. Anyway.
Yeah.
I mean...
888-564-6173. Maddox calling from San Diego, California. Welcome to Pastor's Perspective.
Yeah, hi, gentlemen. Can you hear me?
Of course we can.
Perfect. I appreciate all that you guys do. I have a couple quick questions, and I was listening to K-Wave a few weeks back, and I was on the road, so I tried to take notes, but I couldn't. But there was a pastor speaking about Revelations, tribulation, and the rapture and so forth. And basically, in short, he said, the word church is in the first few chapters of Revelations, maybe 75 times. And I'm paraphrasing here, so I apologize if I get this wrong. But he said the word church is in the first few chapters of Revelations. And then after the few chapters, the word church is never in Revelations after that. And basically stating that the church or us believers are not going to be part of, the tribulation or the hardships that we go through. And he says, and so basically that any pastor that preaches that is, that's kind of false or what, maybe I'm exaggerating that. But I guess the question I have for you is, can you let us know what the different theologies are regarding the second coming, and if us Christians are going to be a part of that, or will we be taken up with Jesus? And then lastly, the second question I have is, my men's group is trying to do a Bible study on this, on the rapture and tribulations, and maybe you guys can recommend some books that will be a good teaching for us in our group.
Well, I would say just listen to Pastor's Perspective any Tuesday that Bobby Conway and Tony Clark are on, because you will hear all the different perspectives on the second coming and the rapture and the tribulation and everything else. But they should write a book together. That'd be interesting. Tony, we'll start with you on this.
Revelation 1:19 gives us an outline to the book. It says, write the things which you have seen, the things which are, and the things which shall take place after this. And so what the pastor was making reference to is that the church is mentioned 19 times in chapters 2 and 3. And then in chapter 4 is a picture or type of the rapture of the church, where the church is in heaven in chapters 4 and 5. And then chapters 6 through 19 that talks about the tribulation period, the church isn't mentioned one time in those chapters that concern the tribulation period that the earth is, 7-year tribulation period that the earth is going to go through. So that's what he was making reference to. In his study, whoever it was that was teaching that. So I can go on and on forever, but I just give you just that little tidbit.
Bobby Conway, do you have an opposing view?
Do you want me to bring up an opposing view? That's funny. I would say for me, I don't think we can have a 100% confidence on the timing of this, and I'm speaking of if it's going to be a pre-trib, a mid-trib, or a post-trib. I think you can have a view, but I don't think that you can say that is the absolute view. So much so that we don't owe it to the flock to let them be aware of the alternative views. Just don't think it is that clear. That's my stance on that. So I really try to advocate pushing our pastors and our teachers and our small group leaders to own a view. If they do, that's fine. But also make sure that we owe it to the people to realize that there's different perspectives. And I don't even think that it's our job to come down hard and say, this is the way it is. I think you could say that there's some very respected believers on some different interpretation options here. And there's good arguments that people make on different sides. And I think that if we just pigeonhole anybody into a post-trib view, for example, then the danger becomes that this person comes along later and realizes that a pre-trib view looks stronger. And now the person is struggling with, why didn't my pastor or my teacher or my small group leader at least inform me? So one of the things that I think even in this culture that we want to do is let people be aware of the views that fit within orthodoxy. let them know where mere Christianity abides, because that way they can think and they can chew and they can and so for me I like being in a church culture where you can have a Calvinist, an Arminian, a pre-trib, a post-trib, and I don't have to try to change that person. What I'm looking for is, are they within mere Christianity? Do they hold to an orthodox view? And they're free to come in and out of different views, and they're not they don't have to conform to my views as a pastor. In fact, I don't want everybody to have all of my same views, because they're probably not thinking. They're just learning from me. But if they're thinking from and learning from others, they're going to have other perspectives than me, and that is perfectly okay with me.
Any thoughts, Brian?
Any thoughts? Well, I guess, can you help us with a men's Bible study on the second coming? That's part of the question here, right?
Yeah, like book recommendations or anything.
Yeah, a book recommendation. Gosh, I can't.
Well, while you're thinking of that, let me go back to Tony really quick, because I think Tony might have wanted to add something.
Yeah.
Well, for me, the Bible says in Amos 3:3, how can two walk together except they agree? And one of the things that I would not, for me, I would not, if someone on the pastoral team has a different view, I think we need to be one as a church, and there needs to be one message going forth from the church. If you have a different view, then and you want to try to teach your view, to me, go start your own church and you can teach that view, and God bless you, be warm, be filled. But for us, we need to have one mind, we need to have one voice, one message coming forth from the church. And so, for me, I'm not into, let's give all the views and then let the people figure it out on their own. And then you got some part of the church that's thinking post, some mid, some pre, and there's not a oneness in my mind about the whole thing. So for me, I'm gonna teach what as the pastor teacher of the church, I'm going to teach this view, and then those who are under me, they're going to take that view to the small groups, that view to the youth ministry, the children's ministry, or whatever, so we can be one sound, we can be one message, and there can be a oneness of the church. Now, that's just my conviction and the way I look at it. Like, for instance, I remember there was someone who was on staff with us, Pastor Brian, and he believed in mid-trib, but he said, because I'm here at Calvary Vista, he said, I will not teach anything other than pre-trib. It's because he don't want there to be any confusion. God is not the author of confusion, but of peace. And so he kept his view to himself. But whenever he taught a mid-trib. So there can be one message and one sound to the church.
Yes, yeah, that's true. I remember there were a few people with different views on that, and I totally get what you're saying, Tony. Obviously, but I get what Bobby's saying too, and I think myself that I want the oneness in a church to be around essential stuff rather than non-essential stuff. So if we're talking about Jesus, who he is, what he did, all of that, obviously that's non-negotiable. You either believe orthodoxy about this, and if you don't, then of course, your Christianity is in question, and we're obviously not going to have you teach. But I think when it comes, for me, and again, just like you said, your conviction is my conviction, and I think at one time I would have, been a little bit closer to where you're at, Tony. But, even back in Vista, I did have, there were a half a dozen folks in the church who had roles in leadership, who had different views. And I wanted even back then to try to make that work. And for the most part, it did, So I would say that I like Bobby's position in the sense that I'm happy to give the 4 views on the timing of the rapture, but I'm also going to come down on where I land and why I land there.
Yeah.
And I obviously land there because I think this is the better argument. So, in the end, it's like these are other options. It's funny because some folks in the church here just told us the other day, and they've been in the church for so long, but they told us the very first time they were exposed to other eschatological ideas, they were completely stumbled because they'd never heard anything like that before. They couldn't believe it. They couldn't believe that somebody was suggesting that there was another idea. And it was in kind of a Bible college setting, and somebody got really upset at the teacher and wanted to fire him, and then the decision was made like, no, we're not going to fire him. He holds to the same view as everybody else, but he felt led to give the views. So anyway, long story short, the people said, we are so thankful that we were exposed to that because it caused us to do a deep dive into all of those different things. And then when we came back and landed where we had always been, now we knew why we landed there rather than we just landed there because from the pulpit we were told this is what it is. So I think there's value to that.
Tony?
Well, let me just say this. Now that you mentioned what you mentioned is good. I'm sorry about that, Bobby. Now that you mentioned what you mentioned, yes, I have given other views and then began to say, but this is where we stand as a church and where I land and why. Yeah. So I have done that. Yeah. So that is true. And
I think as teachers, we're obligated to do it, because it is part of the Christian community's understanding of things, which we might disagree with, but it's a peripheral in some sense. It's a peripheral issue. It's not an essential issue. So,
Bobby?
Yeah. So I would say that, different churches will opt for different ways, and that's fine. I think that we all have to be, accountable to our conscience. What we've done at Image Church is we've created this culture. And so it's not divisive at all. It's actually incredibly unifying. In fact, I frequently have people say how much they appreciate the think tank that we've created within Orthodoxy. And it's been so encouraging because people feel like they can come into the church with different perspectives. Like, in other words, if a Presbyterian and a Methodist both come to the church, I don't want to feel like, now I got to fit them into my doctrine, because I don't feel like I just don't look at myself as somebody that, I stand on the shoulders of greatness. I'm actually overwhelmed by how much I still don't know. I realize that my opinions could change and sharpen. And sometimes I think we can commit so strongly to views that we are trying to stay committed to a denomination or a certain grouping because, we're in that group. That's how they perceive us. So we can't even entertain the kind of thinking, because that would mean we lose our tribe. And I'm not trying to stick with a certain type of a tribe. I'm just trying to say I believe in the death, burial, resurrection of Jesus. I believe he's coming again. I believe that God is triune. I believe in the infallibility of God's word. But I believe that I believe people from many of the different denominations could come into Image Church, and I could have pastors with different perspectives, and their job's not to own my perspective. I will say their job's to be faithful to represent my perspective, but I've created the culture to say things like, hey, we have different perspectives on things at times as pastors, as long as it fits within orthodoxy. And so if it's what you do on this show, Pastor Brian, I feel like we're very unified when we're talking right now. And it's the same culture in my staff team. We get together and we model this before the church, and they're getting pastor's perspective, not the pastor's perspective. And I think that is much more team-oriented, more honoring, and that it creates a culture where people can think, and we don't have to just keep them in a certain denominational box. That is what set me up for so much doubt that I'm trying to protect doubters from getting plagued by this stuff.
Yeah, and you have mentioned that in your book, Doubting Toward Faith, Bobby. Tony, go ahead.
Yeah, one of the things that I just want to just caution on how this can be an issue, a problem, and Pastor Brian remembers this. There was a point in time by which Reformed theology swept through some of the guys overseeing small groups, and they started teaching Reformed theology in the small groups, and it was a huge blow up as a result, because Reformed theology, they're millennialists, they don't believe in a rapture and all that kind of stuff. And here's a church, pre-trib rapture, and believed in a literal 1,000-year reign of Christ. And it began to be an issue and a problem. Some of those guys who got swept up in that end up leaving and going to a Presbyterian church because it was such a blow up over that. I mean, great guys, but because there was not the oneness of the doctrine of the church, they got tweaked out and end up leaving, and and caused some rift where those small groups had to be shut down because of the confusion that it had caused at the church. Now, that's just the potential of what can happen when you got folks in a pastoral position that is teach or believing different types of doctrine, and it just, to me, keep the unity of the faith and the bond of peace. And so, yes, we want to make sure the essentials are squared away, but as a church, we got to be mindful as well of the making sure we agree.
Yeah, and the one thing I would say, and I'm not disputing you at all. I'm just, we lived that, both of us did, and I would say the issue really, at the end of the day, as I look back on it, was not the doctrinal thing. It was pride. Pride was what caused all the problems, because a humble person, a mature person would be able to say, look, I hold this position, but I'm not going to be contentious over it. I'm not going to try to persuade everybody that I'm right, you're wrong. I mean, I had people that I had pretty much raised in the Lord, Tony, who would come to me after a while and tell me, well, Pastor Brian, you really don't even know the gospel. I know the gospel now. And I thought, well, okay, well, that's an interesting perspective, but that was arrogant speaking. Mm-hmm. That was pride. It was so.
Pride causing problems. I mean, I would never think.
Who would have thought?
Right, Bobby?
One of the things that I have had to deal with sometimes is because people come from maybe a particular denomination and they were taught kind of very strongly the one way to see it, I end up having to do a lot of it's like they have to go through this process of seeing that there's other views, and that's very difficult for them. And I just want to protect the difficulty. I don't, but again, this is just my approach for being a pastor, and it's working. But I do think there's dangers in it if we lose sight of what orthodoxy is. I'm not going down a slippery slope here. I just looking at what are the orthodox views.
Tony, 10 seconds?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Brian, 12 seconds.
12 seconds. Guys. Great to see you guys. Fun to be together today.
Love you guys.
I didn't even have to referee anything. I could just be part of the conversation.
Yes. Awesome. Love when that happens. All right. Fun. Talk to you guys tomorrow on Pastor's Perspective.
Have a great Thanksgiving.
Sponsored by Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa.